Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Missing time and blackouts. I haven't seen one of these threads in a long time, so here goes nothing. Be in middle school, walking around minding my own business. Some random girl I'd known for a few months comes up to me and holds my hand. WTF. Let go of her hand and ask what she's doing. Looks at me confused. Tries to grab my hand again. Push her away. She walks away and never talks to me again. Turns out, me and her had been going out for days now, and I somehow completely forgot. My face when... Here is another instance that happened more recently, a few months ago, showing my stepsister a video on my laptop. I am also chatting with someone in another window, but I wait for the video to end. Suddenly, I look over to my brother's laptop that's on the charger, off. Suddenly, I ran over to the laptop yelling no, and opened it and turned it on frantically, scared out of my mind for no reason. My stepsister looks at me weird and asks if I am okay, confused as hell. Still have no idea to this day why I did it. Does shit like this happen to anyone else? Missing time, blackout general thread.
Be less than 2 weeks ago, at the swimming pool, chillin' like a boss near steps to get out in the deep end. Mentally disabled 25-year-old cousin I'm looking after is jumping into the pool. Watch him climb up, sigh and turn around, resting head on the side of the pool. Hear splash sound, followed by water and the sound of something soft and heavy hitting something that's hollow and metal. The rails on the steps to get out of the pool. Turn around to see if my cousin is okay. He's mid-air, about to land in the pool. WTF. The only people in the pool were myself, my cousin, and 2 swimmers on the other end of the pool in the lanes. Still haven't got a clue how it happened.
This goes along with my theory that some mentally disabled people are really just psychic. Their extrasensory stimuli makes interacting with normalville a bit complicated. Your cousin must have seen into the future and in the mental pressure of the fall transmitted the sound from the future into your past brain.
Another experience. At least 5 years ago. Having a fight in school. Be freshman, year 7, I think that's grade 8. Crowd of year 9s around. Win first round, kid knocked down, try to leave. Year 9s push us back against each other. This kid somehow finds the strength to lift me off my feet by grabbing me around the legs. Feel something weird, like anger but different. Blackout. No memory of what the hell happened. Come back to staring at myself in the male toilet mirrors, grinning. Creeped out by myself. Leave the toilets. Mob of people coming towards me. Anon, why did you do that to Anon? Confused. Thought I lost the fight. Blood on knuckles. Go see the nurse. Anon's there. His lip and nose is completely busted. WTF. To this day, I still have no idea how it happened. I was told I did it, but I have no memory of it. The only thing that makes me believe I did was the bits of blood on my knuckles.
I think /x/ is full of bullshit 99% of the time, but I had an experience like this. Freshman in high school, studying for a biology exam one night. Doze off for a bit. Wake up in my bed. The room is completely clean. Check the date. June 14th, 2007. The exam was on May 27th. Start freaking out. Walk out into the living room to see parents watching television. Ask what happened. They look at me funny, and I walk back to my room. Check the dresser, where I keep all my school reports. See report card for June 6th, 2007. Start looking at it. My grades are fine. Check if I missed the biology exam. Biology exam A. What is going on? Double check the date, still June 14th, 2007. I think it's happened several times throughout my high school career, but for shorter periods. I went to the doctor and they said I have no signs of brain malfunction or amnesia.
I have been having a lot of strange realizations about my past. Some things I can't explain. By far, one of the most disturbing was my experience with missing time. It happened 5 years ago. I lived in a small city in Vermont. I grew up in the area and know my way around very well. I was 28 at the time the incident occurred. I was alone, walking home at approximately 1 a.m. I remember after walking for about 20 minutes I had arrived on my street, but I was still about 20 minutes from home. So yeah, about halfway through my walk home, and then nothing happened. It's like I blinked and I was completely lost. I very much had no idea where I was. I knew I was walking north on my last memory, but then I didn't know if the direction I was walking was still north. Was I north of my home? I didn't have any idea. Terrified is to say it plainly. I saw a house with no lights on in a field at the end of a very long driveway with a car in it. I ran to the house and knocked frantically on the door for 15 minutes at least before someone came and yelled at me. I tried to explain to them I was walking and had gotten lost and asked for directions back to town, and they told me the proper direction to travel back to the small city I lived in. I ran back to the road and proceeded to travel back south for about 10 minutes before a car approached from behind me. I was still confused, and I walked into the middle of the road and attempted to flag them down to gain assistance. The car changed lanes and proceeded to travel south, not even slowing down. I must have looked completely insane. I walked for another 15 minutes before a state trooper arrived. I assume called by the people whose house I knocked on about a half-mile behind me. He ran my name and birthday, gave me a breathalyzer, tried to calm me down, and gave me a ride 7 miles south back to my home. It was 4 a.m. when I walked through my door. I did my best to rationalize the experience and told myself I was sleepwalking, or I blacked out for some reason, or maybe there was something wrong with me mentally. It's been years since it happened, and the circumstances have not repeated themselves. When I came to, I was standing. The first thing I remember seeing was my feet walking forward. No one was around. I could believe I sleepwalked it if it wasn't for the distance I traveled. I don't understand how I couldn't have fallen off the road into a field or wandered out into traffic. But to have followed the shoulder of the road for 7 or 8 miles with no memory of the walk. I can just say I have my doubts that this is a case of sleepwalking.
Sitting at my computer at about 11 o'clock at night. See something outside my window. Mildly unnerved. Get up to close it. I feel like I should be able to see something outside. Something big and black moves outside. The left side of my chest up to my shoulder hurts. Skin is red, like a rash. Wasn't there when I got out of the shower a while ago? Close the curtains, go sit down. It is suddenly almost 3 o'clock in the morning. Sit down in bed, leaning against the headboard. Don't fall asleep. I can feel that happening. Suddenly outside, completely clothed, my 2 dogs on leashes and being walked. My parents drove up the hill to the house. Get asked why I'm outside at 6 in the morning walking the dogs instead of inside, asleep.
I grew up in the Arctic. In the town I lived in, as long as it was a clear night, it was an extremely normal occurrence to see all sorts of strange lights move across the sky. Keep in mind the winter is long in the Arctic, which means longer amounts of time being spent under the stars. It's quite beautiful, as long as you don't mind the cold so much. Sometimes I would drive a snowmobile a few kilometers out of town, shut it down, and just lay down on the snow looking up at the majesty of it all, the only thing disturbing the silence being the occasional breeze. The northern lights are also a common occurrence. Doesn't happen every day, but often enough that they start getting ignored after a while, as long as they aren't too spectacular anyway. On one particular night, without asking my parents, it was their snowmobile, I decided to go on one of my midnight drives out of town. I drove a few kilometers over the hills to find a spot devoid of light pollution from town, shut off the machine, and settled into a good spot to look up and be retrospective. It wasn't all that interesting a scene. A few satellites passing here and there, some relatively boring activity affecting the magnetic field, etc. And then I started noticing a clicking noise. At first I thought it was the sound of the snowmobile cooling down, as the engine expands and contracts a lot in the cold. But the source of the sound definitely wasn't coming from that direction. My next thought was there must be an animal nearby, in which case I need to get out of there fast. You don't really want to mess with a wild animal. But the clicking is far too regular for an animal to produce it. It was fairly mechanical sounding. And again, the source of the sound isn't coming from anywhere around me laterally. It was coming from up. So naturally, I look up, determined to ascertain the origin of this strange noise. I see what I always see. Stars, northern lights, a lazy satellite crossing the sky. All normal stuff. But before I dismiss it altogether and begin heading home, I noticed something strange in the aurora borealis. There were 3 rather strong points of light. I ignored them at first, thinking they were oddly symmetrical stars, but this proved false. They were definitely getting brighter. I kept staring in morbid fascination as they grew stronger and stronger, yet still only remaining single points in the sky. All the while, the clicking noise is getting louder and louder and more pronounced, almost like someone started with tapping a pen on a desk to clacking billiard balls together inside my head. Then it stops. The lights are gone, the clicking is not heard, and aside from being a little stiff, cold, and rather petrified, I'm fine. So I jump back on the snowmobile thinking maybe I'm going crazy. It takes a little longer than usual to start up, and I'm beginning to worry. But soon it's running and I'm heading back to town. As I'm driving back, several plausible scenarios as to what occurred are running through my head. I'm thinking it could have been a helicopter from the mine, or some strange northern lights behavior, etc. Probably not that big a deal. I pull up to my house. Lights are all dark. Strange. It wasn't that late when I left. Open the outer door as quietly as possible. Remove winter gear. Enter the inner door. House is quiet. Really quiet. My parents are teachers and are usually up late marking or watching TV. All I'm thinking is I have to get to bed without anyone noticing. Proves to be easy as I'm soon under my covers. I go to set my alarm for the next day. All of the sudden, everything makes sense. Engine hard to start. Stiff, rather chilly. Nobody up when I was gone for what felt like a relatively short period of time. It was almost 11 p.m. when I left, and now it was creeping up at 6 a.m. I stood staring at clicking lights for almost 7 hours. I never ended up sleeping that night, and I don't go on late-night snowmobile rides anymore.
This one isn't so paranormal because I think there is an explanation, but it was still bizarre drinking with friends. Late at night, down to me and a bro. Other friends went ahead and passed out. Me and him are shooting the shit and carrying on a casual conversation. At one point I blink. It's daylight. I'm still sitting upright. I'm still saying the sentence I was saying several hours prior. Actually, I woke up my friend with what I was saying. Ask him about it. He says I just closed my eyes suddenly and stopped talking mid-sentence. I wouldn't respond to anything. He just went on to bed. I think it had something to do with the alcohol, but I still thought it was odd that I would continue to be talking like I didn't miss a beat when nearly 8 hours had passed.
This incident started in late 1999. A childhood acquaintance wanted to introduce me to one of their friends from work. We were in our early 20s at the time, and the person he was introducing me to was probably mid-30s. This was a little unusual because usually we stuck with people around our age group. The guy drove a classic car with tinted windows and had a retro look. I'm not sure how it came up, but within like 1 hour of meeting him, he showed me a small glass vial filled with liquid and 2 black discs suspended in the liquid. He demonstrated them. They were full eye contacts that even covered the white part of his eye and made them look black. He went on to tell how he had them custom-made for $400. I said to him, "Why?" After all, $400 was a lot of money. He said, "For fun." This was before anyone knew anything about the black-eyed phenomenon, and I really did not think much of it. Fast forward to late 2008. I was leaving home for a night out on the town, at least an hour's drive away. I stopped at a gas station just before getting on the freeway, approximately 40 minutes from my destination. It was dark at around 9 p.m. I go into the gas station to grab a Red Bull and see a woman standing an aisle over. She was wearing a black leather jacket and had short blonde hair down to her jawline. I estimate her age was mid-30s or early 40s. I heard her ask the attendant, "Is XX Town north or south of here?" This was a location everyone would know, and I immediately thought it was a weird question. Why on earth would someone be at this place and be asking which direction this town, 100 miles away, was? Then it happened. She turned around, and looked directly at me, and her entire eyes were completely black. I think I froze for a moment, not knowing what to do. I waved it off as strange and continued about my evening. The evening was fairly normal. I went out and met up with a few people, etc. Heading home, I ran into a problem. I was driving home on the freeway, and there was hardly any traffic out. There was a large, heavy-duty pickup truck following me way too close. I was approximately 2/3 of the way home at this point. I remember getting blasted by an all-encompassing white light. My brain processed it as light, but seemed to not be directional and did not cast shadows and fill up every space like a thick mist. Next thing I know, I'm still driving on the freeway, and the truck is gone. I looked over to the lane to the left, and some girl plastered her face and hands on the window, staring at me. I figured she was trying to build up some kind of hysteria or just acting goofy. I continued home. It wasn't until then I looked at the clock and noticed 2 hours of missing time. Since this time, I have noticed a trend of women with shoulder-length blonde hair seemingly stalking me from time to time. Usually when this happens, an event of extreme strangeness or paranormal activity occurs. I don't think it's the same woman, but they all fit the same look profile.
When I was a kid, it was a sort of tradition to go to my grandparents' lake house for Easter. It was a typical year. I remember I wore a yellow dress, and I hated it because it got in the way when I bent to pick up eggs. I remember my basket was blue and yellow, and my plastic candy-filled eggs would tumble out occasionally. I remember being in my dad's car, silver with leather interior, and looking at the lake house as we were driving away, going home. Next thing I know, we're in a different car driving down the road toward the lake house. At first I wondered why we were going back and figured someone had forgotten something. Then I realised I'm in a white dress with coloured flowers. Later, my grandma hands me a large pink basket. I remember asking her why we're going Easter egg hunting again, and she gave me that confused look where she stuck out her lower lip and pushed her eyebrows together. Complete lapse of memory between those 2 Easters. I think I was around 13 or 14 years old. Probably not one of the more interesting stories, but whatever.
I am a long-haul driver and was traveling east on Interstate 8, just east of Fortuna, Arizona. This occurred in mid-June 2017. Having checked the clock, it was 3:45 a.m. when I alerted my partner to the presence of 3 or 4 individuals standing in the middle of the traffic lane. After sounding the truck horn, I began to slow our rig. Given the fact that the area is well known for human smuggling and is dangerous to travel, I wondered if perhaps we should keep going. But when it became apparent that at least 3 of the individuals were wearing some kind of uniform, I decided to stop along the right shoulder. Nevertheless, my second driver emerged from the sleeper with the shotgun that we carry. Both of us agreed that neither of us was going to step from the cab, and we kept the engine idling. 3 individuals walked slowly toward me, toward the driver's side of the cab. At about 15 feet, I could tell that all 3 of them were suited, if you will, in some sort of gear. I wondered if the Marines from the nearby Marine Corps Air Station had crashed and were going to ask us for help. As I lowered the driver's window, the shortest of the 3, bundled in heavy white gear, with what looked like white armor around the chest, and a partial faceplate that emerged from below the chin, said to me in perfect English, "Not to worry, we have a minor situation." He motioned with his left arm toward the distance, off the highway. It was strange because neither my partner nor I saw anything as we approached the group, but sure enough, something was putting out intense red flames, maybe 50 feet off the right shoulder from where we were parked. Before I could say anything, a triangle-shaped wedge of the landscape to our right, with the flames at the base of the triangle, rose up and sliced through the truck cab. For lack of a better description, I felt like I was looking at some kind of image as it came through the cab. I mean, the individual who spoke to me appeared first on the left side near me, and then appeared on the right side, the raised side, then on both sides, which appeared raised. My throat was so dry, and my stomach was in knots. Honestly, I felt like I was going to throw up. I figured we had it. 3 individuals, 2 in white, wearing helmets, and one who appeared burned or blackened and without a helmet appeared in the image to our right as they made their way around chunks of rock, walking towards our cab. There was a lot of communication, like radio, between them, or between somebody. The one who had spoken to me after I had lowered the window now sounded metallic. So I turned once again towards the voice, to my left again, toward the open window, and he, or it, wasn't there. I turned toward my partner in the right front seat, who was still cradling the shotgun, but nothing. I mean, it was black. It was perfectly silent. There were no flames off to the right in the distance. Our clock showed 5:15 a.m., and only the entire encounter felt like it had lasted 15 minutes or so. I don't know what to claim. I stopped to assist several entities that appeared to be projected from somewhere, and I still feel nauseous.
I have time lapses anytime I'm more than half submerged in water. As a result, I take a shower, which mostly stops it, although time seems to pass faster. The worst lapse so far. It's about 4 in the evening. Brother has a party in 2 hours. Water's shut off due to plumbing issues. Decide to go swimming to wash off. Swim for a bit. Blink. Everything seems brighter. I feel really tired all of a sudden. Fingers pruning. Go to the shore. Skin a little bit above my ankles and down is pruning slightly. Try to stand. Legs too wobbly to stand. Make my way over to the log I put my stuff on. Fish my phone out of my pants. 23 missed calls and 16 messages. They're all from my brother asking where I'm at. Why did he call so much it's not even dark out yet? Check the clock. 10:30 something the next morning.
I was working alone, finishing a house at a fairly remote area near Little Fort, British Columbia, keeping my own hours. The house had wood heat. The time was midwinter in 1988 with a foot of compact snow on the ground. I worked out of a small wood shop close to the house. My schedule was somewhat erratic, so I kept a logbook of what type of work was done and how many hours of labor I had performed each day. This book was updated daily, or at least every other day. I'd been working there for about 5 weeks. I'd been off to town the previous weekend, picking up supplies, and had returned Sunday night. Monday I was working in the shop and things were going well. The next thing I remember, I was standing in the house, confused as if I had just come out of a fog. I did not recall how I got there. I just seemed to appear. The house looked dusty and unlived in, like when you come home from a holiday and no one has been around. I felt I could not get my bearings, as if I had just had an electric shock. I could not figure out what day it was. I turned on the radio and it was Friday morning, about 10:30 a.m. I tried to reason out what was going on, to get my bearings, and I could not. Oddly, my logbook was open on that day, Friday. What have I been doing? I asked myself. I turned the book in on Thursday and there was nothing written. Oh well, I said to myself, this occasionally happened. Usually I write every day. I turned to Wednesday, nothing. I was starting to worry I had never missed 2 days before. I turned to Tuesday and nothing. Monday, nothing. I went to the previous Friday, before going to town, and looked at the work written. This was the last work done. I could remember nothing from Monday noon. I checked the shop and everything was as it should be as of Monday. Nothing has been done since Monday noon. Back to the house. The food I packed in the fridge Sunday night had not been touched. The firewood I stacked Sunday night against the house was there, so there was no wood burnt, yet the house was not freezing. The house was in a state of stasis, not cold but not warm. I examined myself and I was warm and dry. I had not been out in the snow. I looked at my vehicle and the tracks in the snow. I could see that I had not driven since Sunday and no one had driven in. There were no footprints in the snow but mine. I was not hungry or dehydrated, yet I was wearing the same clothes as I was on Monday. I was not smelly or dirty. I now feel that I was under a post-hypnotic suggestion because a voice in my head said over and over, I must have been here working. I must have been here working. On and on. Within an hour of appearing back on Monday, I falsely wrote in work hours for the missing 4 days. This still bothers me since I pride myself on my honesty. During the writing, I knew I had not done the work because there was nothing done. The work was linear, one step after another, and I was clearly inventing false labor. Yet I continued. I kept this logbook for years, yet my falsehood was so effective that I could not identify which week this occurred. Eventually, I threw the book out since I could not decipher it and it just bothered me more. Life went on, and I convinced myself that it had just been fatigue, in spite of the surrounding evidence.
Gather at a friend's house I have never been to before. Always a mutual gathering before, so I was excited to see her place. Go there and meet everyone. It's all fine. Shit, need to get alcohol. Can someone drive me to the shop? Don't worry, Anon, we have plenty here. Talking leads to dares and that. I ended up sculling a whole bottle of vodka. Gloated about how I can't feel any burn. Talk normally for another 5 minutes. Wake away frightened as I had dreams that I was dying. Lying in my friend's bathroom with vomit everywhere. Get a bottle of water, clean up my mess, apologize to everyone and all that, and head back home. Have to pass through the major town in the area. I didn't drive, so I was on the bus. Go into the shopping center to get more soda water and light food as my stomach can't take much. Suddenly, get Keisha's Die Young playing in my head intensely. Start humming it and turn the corner. It's playing in a store I'm walking past and I'm humming in sync. Go home, start humming it again. Plays perfectly with an ad that comes on as I turn on the TV. Go to sleep on a Sunday night. Wake up. It's Tuesday. I've finished my assignments. Out of character for me. And the only thing on my desktop is a YouTube link to Kesha's Die Young. My desktop was always clean, so no shortcuts were deleted.
I've had a weird time loop distortion of reality happen to me while driving. It was Christmas night 2016, and I was headed back home around 9 p.m. To get home, I have to take this back road through the countryside to get up into the foothills of the Sierras where I live. I had a strange feeling come over me, but I shrugged it off as just me being tired. The road was pretty desolate. I remember on the wide blind turn I passed an oncoming car, then continued on for about 1.5 miles up towards the traffic light at the college. As soon as I climbed the slight hill up the straightaway where the traffic light was in view, I instantly noticed that the light wasn't there like normal. Then, in an instant, I ended up back on the road right before the wide blind turned 1 mile back from where I had just already driven. This time, no car passed by me as I went through the turn, and the clock minutes never changed, just kept ticking forward. As far as I know, I experienced no missing time throughout the whole event. When I ended up back on the road where I had just driven all over again, I felt as if I was just thrown into the car. I felt strange and my body felt different, as if I had had an out-of-body experience, and my legs shook uncontrollably. I could barely operate the pedals. I was very scared because I'd never had anything like that happen to me before, especially on a desolate road at night. The only thing I can think is that I ended up in some temporary time loop, or I was abducted with no missing time, and they put me back on the road 1.5 miles earlier, then me driving the same stretch of road twice. But I can't figure out why the traffic light wasn't there when it should have been, nor why it was the trigger to put me backward on the road. The second time the light was there as normal when I drove back up the hill, but so far I have no clue why or how that happened.
Something like your first story happened to me once. While in middle school, I was eating lunch in the cafeteria, and a girl walked up to me and told me that so-and-so was breaking up with me. She was also very angry about it, as if I had done something wrong. I don't know who that person was, though, and I have no idea who I was supposedly going out with.
My family moved from my hometown the summer after 5th grade. A year or so later, my dad made a business trip back to that area and took me along. I got to spend a day back at my old school, a small elementary school of under 200 kids. My class of about 20 hadn't really changed. It was a normal day of getting reacquainted with friends I'd had for most of my life, but hadn't really stayed in touch with, as I suppose kids of that age were then wont, especially in those dark days before the interwebs, SMS, and cheap or free long-distance calling. As the day wore on, only one thing was strange. A girl who kept spending time with me like we were best of friends. Wanted to play at recess, sat across from me at lunch, etc. I couldn't place her for the life of me, and figured she had been new to the class in the year after I'd left, and just sort of was interested in life beyond the little town, not a strange thing in and of itself. Finally, in my totally socially awkward way, a knack that's remained with me to this day, BTW, I blurted out something like, "Have we met?" That's when Erin reminded me that we'd been in the same class together since kindergarten. Oops. To this day, I think it's the most embarrassed I've ever been in my life, and there's been lots of competition for that title since. But I'd truly forgotten her somehow until hearing her name, and I've got absolutely no idea how that could have happened. Before you say kids change, nope. She was the only red-headed girl in the school, kind of like Charlie Brown's ongoing crush. There's no way I could have confused her for somebody else. I just plain forgot, I suppose.
This has been happening to me ever since I was little. I always live out some part of a full life of a man born in 812 AUC called Spurius Ulpius Cianethus Juventi. I am nicknamed Felis by my friends. I have not yet lived every instant, but I have the main skeleton of my story. Grow up a common plebeian landowner in Rome, later moved to Selinus. Son of a good man called Flavian, a veteran of many fine battles. He retires when I am 17 to look after me when my mother passes from illness. Do decently in school, live in a beautiful country, extreme pride of being a common Roman, marry a fine woman called Spuria who gifts me a healthy young boy called Flavian while living in Selinus. Participated in wars against the Parthians in 866 AUC, 114 AD, as a legionnaire in the Sixe Ferrata. Fight hard against tribal men in Armenia and other Parthian cities. Our legion receives the praise of our Emperor Trajan. Hear Trajan speak to us in Rome and on the front line. Very religious man, taking part in many sacrifices of fine oxes and healthy lambs. Later that year I am struck by an arrow which lodges itself between the plates of my armor, in my gullet. My armor does me well and my countrymen help me to my feet. Later my son jokes about how the arrow that did not kill me was a reminder that Trajan was not Apollo, sent by the gods. Flavian is later a soldier of Rome and then an architect, building many fine structures under Hadrian. Die in my sleep in Selinus, which is now called Trajanopolis by plebeian and patrician alike.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
To check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.